Everybody, welcome to Perpetual Motion, a podcast for those who share my passion for professional development. I'm your host, Dr. Mo Anderson, and my focus is improving personal finance, communication, relationships, and personal growth. My guest today is Sheryl Carroll. Sheryl is an ex-banking professional turned integrative or integrative, depending on how you choose to pronounce it, integrative health practitioner and health coach. The tragic passing of her close friend to bowel cancer in 2015 set Sheryl off on a mission to understand what healthy really means. Today, she is passionate about supporting women to master their health so they can step into their full potential. She says true health is not about eating less and exercising more. So, what is it about then? Stay with us and find out. Welcome, Sheryl.
Thank you so much. It's so good to be here with you.
I'm excited. And you're coming to us from down under, I believe.
Yes.
Where are you in Australia?
Yeah, so South African living in Sydney.
Beautiful, beautiful. That's on my bucket list. I've traveled a lot, but I haven't been to Sydney yet. I can see through your window, if that's not a virtual background, that it's a beautiful day and
Yeah,
it's
it's roasting.
awesome. It's a chilly night here in Texas. So we are literally night and day, as they say, but we are going to come together on this conversation and it's going to be bright and sunny, just like the view through your window. Sheryl, I read this on your website and I quote, "You know that feeling when you've let your health slide and you don't know or even like that person staring back at you in the mirror. We've all been there. I want to know, end quote, have you been there? Because you look very awesome. Was there a time you didn't like what you saw in the mirror?"
Yeah, absolutely. And that's taken different shapes and forms. So I'll go back to, I would say the first time in my life where I felt deeply uncomfortable in my skin was in my 20s when I went to work on a ski resort in Colorado. And I worked in the kitchen and all the chefs just used to feed me all the time, just used to feed me. Obviously.
I imagine that's what happens in the kitchen too.
And so I went back to South Africa where I was still finishing off my studies, and I feel like I doubled in size and I felt deeply uncomfortable because I'd never had to worry about, what I ate, what I did. I was always very small. And that started me off on, okay, I needed to exercise. I started to restrict the food that I was eating. And I actually went through a phase of being very restrictive, probably very underweight, and just not feeling comfortable in myself. I feel like those years, the 20s are fun, but they're a bit of a, you're just trying to figure out who you are. And so, yes, I went through,
Go ahead. I was just thinking how I was just so judgmental of myself during my 20s, just forever finding something wrong with myself, no matter what people said. So I'm just relating to what you're sharing. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. So that was kind of where it started off, where I felt deeply uncomfortable, and I fell into some very unhealthy habits. But because it was all around exercise, eating healthier, I was seen to be healthy. So much so that when I moved to London in 2005, I got into long distance running. I lost my period, so I was deeply unhealthy, and that's kind of all part of my past. And really now in the state of understanding and awareness of what true health really is, how unhealthy I was, even though I was thin, exercised a lot, ate traditionally healthy. So I think there was that point in my life where I was uncomfortable in my skin physically. And I would say more recently, there's been a real looking at myself in the context of how I show up in my life, with my children, with my husband, with my, those closest around me, when I am feeling stretched. So that has really been that is now my barometer in terms of how healthy and regulated I am, is how well am I able to respond
Yes.
when there's chaos going around me. Because, and I think with my wisdom now and my constant practice, I don't beat myself up about it.
Mm-hmm.
I recognize where I need to support myself to be able to respond rather than react more. And
Mm-hmm.
that's what I work on. But there's definitely been, a bit of shaming and not being happy with the way that I've been showing up as a person,
Mm-hmm.
rather than looking at my physical body as a measure of kind of self-worth, if that makes sense.
Yes, it does. And there was a pendulum swing there that I think most of us, have experienced from overdoing it and trying to get into shape to being, lackadaisical about it, especially when we're young, because you got that high metabolism and you just,
Mm.
kind of think I can eat, drink, and be merry. So, and then to bring, as we age, it's not something we stop thinking about, but to bring that emotional component in, that, it's an inside out really thing that's where the health starts. So, I just wanted you to share a little bit about your personal journey, because I always like for listeners to understand that, unlike Beyonce, most of us don't come here. We didn't wake up like this. So when you shared that, look, I've struggled with these same challenges, I just think that lends to your credibility.
Absolutely. So yes, I would say exactly as I've just described, it kind of my health journey as such, where I brought awareness to my body, my physical health, started, in my
Mm-hmm.
20s, but, recognizing now how unhealthy that was. But,
Right.
I worked through my fluctuations and got to a point of feeling much healthier in myself, who I was as a person, all of that, around my mid 30s,
Yeah.
as you do. And so I guess one of the next kind of pivotal moments when it came to me trying to understand what healthy meant, or
Mm-hmm.
questioning my approach to what health was when my best friend here in Australia was diagnosed with bowel cancer when I was pregnant with my first child, my daughter.
Mm-hmm.
So 6 months pregnant, get the news that my friend is stage 4 bowel cancer. So she pretty much got diagnosed, never left hospital. So I was going through this process with her. So
Wow.
bringing new life into the world whilst dealing with death of, somebody who was very close to me, who also shared
Right.
this passion for health. We were always the ones who were exercising, finding the salad bars,
Mm-hmm.
all of that kind of stuff. And that really shook me. So she passed, unfortunately. It's just been her 8th anniversary on the 30th of November. And I just felt full of fear. I'm like, if this can happen to somebody who's seemingly healthy, who's got an interest in health, it can happen
Right.
to anyone.
Right.
So I had this question in my head. I feel like, given I'm creating a family, I need to understand, am I making the right choices? So fast forward to when I was pregnant with my son, just gave birth. I said to my husband, I'm ready to do some extra study. I want to do something around nutrition. I feel like that's where I need to go.
Mm-hmm.
So he was very fully supportive, and I signed up for the Institute of Integrative Nutrition Health Coaching certification. And that gave me a really broad view of holistic health, all the different pillars of what health really
Right.
is,
Right.
which is amazing. But I wanted to go deeper. And I started to follow Dr. Stephen Cabral, who's a naturopathic doctor who brings together different modalities of healing and health.
Mm-hmm.
And I was part of the first intake of his health coaching certification. And I did his level 1s, which is more lifestyle focused, and level 2, which is all around functional medicine lab testing protocols for imbalances in the body.
Mm-hmm.
And after doing his course and following him for such a long time, I felt so empowered. I understood what had happened to my friend. I understood why this disease, festered in her body, because any
Mm-hmm.
disease that we have has been brewing for years.
Yes.
So there's stuff that's going on that there were signs that I just didn't know to help her connect the dots. So I
Right.
felt so empowered, and also it married my background, which was actually auditing. I'm a chartered accountant, of connecting the dots, trying to find the root cause
Right.
of things, to actually an area that was fully is my passion.
Right,
So
right. Attention to detail and how things relate to each
how
other.
things, yes,
That's a wonderful marriage of passions and professions. Well, let's take advantage of some of that great knowledge that you obtained in your educational pursuits, and kudos to you for, turning that difficult. And my sympathies about your friend. I've
thank
experienced
you.
loss of loved ones in 8 years or 18 years. It's still is challenging. It's something that's with you, but I like that you turn that experience and your own into, a passion for helping others, because you can go so many ways with grief
Mm,
and with difficult
mm,
experiences. So I want to start with one of the topics you coach and teach about is menopause. So let's talk about women's health a bit. And I want to start there with menopause and perimenopause. We know that that's a decline in reproductive hormones when we reach the middle ages, around 40s or 50s. What should women know or anticipate about this period of life?
mm. So I think when I recognized that I was in perimenopause, even though I'm trained in this, there isn't actually, well, I'd say maybe 2 years ago, there wasn't as much knowledge and understanding of this area.
Hmm.
Doctors, GPs get one module in medical school when it comes to this area, which is such a significant area.
Right.
And so I think it's probably important just to land on the definitions, because I think women are surprised when they learn about what these phases are. So perimenopause is obviously before menopause comes, and
Hmm.
it can start from as early as the age of 35. And this is when we have the gradual decline of our sex hormones, the first one being progesterone. So it
Hmm.
can be very subtle in the beginning, and then that goes as long as, the average age of menopause, which is described as 1 year when somebody has not had a menstrual cycle, hasn't had a
Okay.
bleed. So perimenopause is the phase all the way up to menopause, and then you spend the rest of your life in menopause.
The rest of your
So
life.
in
Oh,
menopause, yeah.
that's disappointing to hear. I keep waiting for it to be over.
Oh, no. But that is so menopause, which is when you haven't had a period for a year.
Hmm.
That is just it's just a time bound definition. And I think what
Oh,
you're
okay, not
referring
not the
to,
symptoms, right. I'm referring to the symptoms. I'm like, "Oh, no, they
no, this is
can't
just
have
the
hot flashes
definition.
forever." Okay.
And so, exactly to your point, I think what women don't recognize is actually the bulk of the symptoms actually happen in the perimenopause phase,
Oh, okay.
not the menopause phase. Because if you can
Alright.
think of perimenopause as this being the second puberty, so your body, what's actually happening is your ovaries are saying, I'm no longer going to be the primary sex hormone producing gland. I'm handing over to the adrenal glands.
Mhm.
So there's this recalibration happening. There's like the pituitary gland talking to the ovaries, trying to get this process going because it's used to this rhythm of how things work. And all of a sudden,
Right,
when that
right.
rhythm changes, it can cause chaos in our bodies because we've got hormone receptors all over our bodies. And when the sex hormones start to shift and change,
Okay.
that's when we start to experience all of these different symptoms. Hot flashes are really just a symptom generally that comes more towards menopause itself,
Mhm.
because if somebody goes into perimenopause at the age of 35 and they go into menopause at the age of 51, that's a long transition that we've got going on there.
Right,
And so we've
right.
got these phases of perimenopause, which is the first phase being very subtle changes. Progesterone, which is the lovely calming hormone that we get after ovulation, starts to dip down. So the subtlety of the symptoms, women often don't even recognize, like a slight shortening in their cycle, more irritable, slightly heavier bleeding.
Mhm.
Maybe if they're prone to migraines, and maybe getting more hormonal migraines.
Mhm.
increase in endometriosis symptoms, those sorts of
Which
things.
is
So
painful. Yeah.
quite subtle symptoms. Like it's just an exacerbation of their existing experience of their hormonal symptoms. And then as you move more towards menopause, what ends up happening is there's this, as I mentioned, there's a shouting match between the brain and the ovaries saying, produce estrogen. And sometimes there's this shootout of estrogen. So we get really high levels of estrogen, and other times the ovaries don't cooperate and there's like nothing. So the
Got it.
body's got this fluctuation of symptoms, things going on. It's like, what is going on here? I need help.
Got it.
Then
Okay.
as you move more towards menopause, you have the petering out of both progesterone and estrogen until you no longer have a menstrual cycle for a year. And then what happens is in those first kind of 2 to 5 years, your body settles into the new amount of hormones that you're going to be producing long term. And that's when the symptoms should ideally start to
decline.
Yeah.
Okay. Why do women need to change what they do in these phases as opposed to when they were younger?
So as I mentioned, you have hormone receptors all over your body. So estrogen and progesterone do so much for you from a muscle strength perspective, from a brain health perspective, from like a mental health perspective as well.
Now,
So
when you say muscle health, do you mean like the tone of the
strength
muscles?
of our muscles, your ability to build muscle. Yeah, the ability to build muscles. When estrogen is an anabolic hormone, and the other hormone, which I haven't mentioned, which is testosterone, which all women have, also starts to decline, but it's not linked to menopause. Our testosterone levels start to decline from the age of 25, but will reduce more when we've got high levels of stress.
Right.
So these are the anabolic hormones that help us to build muscle. So women find it much more difficult to build muscle or hold onto their muscle as they start to lose their hormones. So a lot of women get what's called sarcopenia, which is muscle loss with age. And that is also coupled with bone loss. We need strong muscles, strong bones.
The density, yeah.
Yeah. So that's also kind of an important link. Our gut microbiome changes. We become less resilient to stress, because if you think about it, the ovaries are handing over to the adrenal glands to pick up the slack with the sex hormones. And if your adrenals are maxed, they're going to struggle to pick up any slack if they're just pumping out cortisol, etc. So really what we need to be doing is when we've got these shifts in hormones, we need to lean into lifestyle to pick up the slack from what we relied on our hormones supporting us to do in our prime reproductive years. So what we eat is even more important now. There's a lot more leeway in our reproductive years to be able to eat junk and then realize, I need a bit of a reset, cut calories, run 5 kilometers a day, and then you're back in your skinny jeans. Like it doesn't work. Yeah, that doesn't work for a perimenopausal woman, or it may work for maybe a week, but then it's going to backfire because
you kind of plateau.
Yeah. And you then start to put on weight because there's no such thing as hormonal balance in perimenopause because you're going on this journey, but it's about optimizing your experience in the context of the hormonal shifts.
Understood.
And because your hormonal profile is changing every day, probably every month, as you head towards menopause, doing these strong self-check-in reviews of how am I feeling? How am I doing? Am I taking on too much? Am I eating well enough to fuel my body? How is my sleep? Is really important to be able to drive yourself forward in the way that you want to. So really lifestyle becomes even more significant levers for us to lean into in order for us to achieve our goals, whether that's in business, whether that's body transformation goals, how you want to show up for your family, etc.
Let's talk about the physical part of it a little bit, because we see that being pushed a lot now, but there's a debate, or I'm confused on I know the weight bearing can help with the bone density and you know, building up muscle, I guess is what I'm trying to say. But then the cardio is important for heart health. How do you balance that? It seems like most of the people I know, they either do one or the other. They don't do both. And I'm of the mind that both are important, but I'm
Yeah,
based on what you said, it sounds like you need the weights more, or no?
you're right. You do need it all. So
Okay.
it's about structuring like a balanced exercise program. So when I think
Hmm.
about it, we want to be thinking about muscular strength, muscular endurance, like power and speed, like being able to move quickly, have the power to do things, because
Hmm.
we lose that a lot with age. Mobility, flexibility, and exactly as you said, the cardiovascular fitness. So this can be done in many different ways. So yes, prioritizing, I would say, working with a personal trainer to check out your form, to make sure that you are doing things in a safe way that allows you to lift the size of weights that are needed to put enough pressure to help with building the muscles and also building the bones. So that's really important,
Right. And not
because I
get
think a lot of
injured.
exactly,
Right.
exactly, because a lot of women at this phase of life have had children, so they've got compromised cores, or even if somebody has had gut issues for ages and have just been really bloated,
Hmm.
that changes the pelvis. Somebody with fibroids, also massive fibroids, it changes the pelvis. So that changes
The
the movement
pelvis?
patterns. Yeah, yeah,
Really?
yeah,
Wow. Okay.
yeah. So it can
Interesting.
change how our movement patterns. So we just need to make sure that everything is kind of moving in the
Hmm.
right way to be able to carry the load. Otherwise, you're exactly right. You're going to get injured. And then and with that, it's important to do some mobility work to be able to get full range of motion in your muscles and your joints,
Okay.
because that also diminishes with age.
Hmm.
So stretching, Pilates, yoga, those sorts of things are very, very helpful. And then, doing some level of sprints, but not so much that stresses the body, because that's the fine balance when it comes to exercise for a midlife woman. It's doing enough to
Hmm.
bring about the right stimulus, but it's about also not doing too much that it causes stress to the body, and then we adding stress to a body that can't buffer as much stress as it used to be able to. So
Got it.
short, sharp sprints for maybe 20 minutes, and then
Hmm.
that's done. It's the sort of exercise like F45, CrossFit, Orange Theory, I think you guys have there as well,
Yeah, we do.
is really not the best exercise for midlife women. And
Understood.
then
Got it.
from a cardiovascular standpoint, doing things, obviously sprinting is cardiovascular,
Hmm.
but doing the lower intensity walks, just getting your general movement in through the day, great. If you love running, I would say just watch getting into that medium intensity zone, which is called zone 3, because that means you're training in the gray, and it's that gray training, which is what Orange Theory puts you into, F45 puts you into, will add stress and inflammation to your system, and will not support you to get the body transformation goals that
And
you're
that's
looking
going
for.
to counter what you're trying to do,
Yeah,
counterbalance, as
exactly.
opposed
Yeah,
to
yeah, yeah,
balance
yeah.
it all. So that's good information. I hadn't heard that before, and that is your opinion and belief. I'm not speaking to those particular organizations, but this is your area of expertise, and I appreciate you sharing that, because those are very popular programs, and we
Mm.
don't know what we don't know.
Just just on that, there is a brilliant author and researcher called Dr. Stacey Sims, and she's released a book called Next Level, which
Hmm.
explains all of the concepts around exercise for midlife women, and talks about how to tweak training. Like if you're somebody who loves endurance running, for example, it teaches you how to tweak your training schedule so that you can still do the race, but your training is done in a way that does not exacerbate your perimenopausal symptoms. Because what is very, very clear is that if your body is incredibly stressed, then your perimenopausal symptoms are going to be up here. So really working through lifestyle to bring down stress, which is, eating well, sleeping well, not over exercising, recovering enough, detoxing the system, that all adds to that reducing the stress in the stress bucket.
Okay. And to be clear, the stress could be like work, burnout, stress, as well as you physically stressed it by your exercise.
Yes.
Okay. Every type of stress. Got it.
Yes.
So we talked about the lifestyle changes, what happens during perimenopause and menopause, which I think some of my male listeners are going to be distraught to find out that lasts so long. But having been through it, I can attest to, yes, it does. And you learn to accommodate it. What, during this period, and, hopefully people are getting regular medical care, but I always like to keep in mind that people have different circumstances. They might be out of work, might not be insured, might not have the best care, but I know that there's some testing that should be done during this period if you're seeing your healthcare provider. What are some of the tests in particular that you should be getting, and if you're not getting, if they're not being offered, you should ask for?
Yeah. So it's very difficult to test to see if you are in perimenopause because the hormones go on these wild swings. There is a test that you can do to determine if you are in menopause, and that's going to be testing to see if you've got consistently elevated luteinizing hormone and follicular stimulating hormone, so LH and FSH. But generally, when you have not had a period for a year, you're going to assume that you are there. So, the doctor will just confirm that through the test. So if you are somebody who's going to want to go onto hormone therapy, getting the testing done anyway is important so that you can monitor how your levels move when you're on hormones. So there's that. So you're wanting to test what are your testosterone levels, progesterone levels, and estrogen levels, and also DHEA, which is a precursor hormone. The only thing to say there is that if you are not regularly ovulating, it's very difficult to know when to test to figure out what your levels of progesterone are. Because to get a clear, like for somebody with a regular cycle, it's 5 to 7 days after ovulation. But if you don't know if you're ovulating, then that's tricky to land on. So sometimes the testing doesn't really tell you anything around your progesterone levels. So that's purely from a sex hormone standpoint. But there's obviously the rest of the body systems that we need to be looking at to see how they are functioning. So, full blood panel, looking at your liver and your kidney health, looking at your levels of inflammation using a marker like C-reactive protein, fasting insulin, fasting glucose, looking at a full thyroid panel. Because what I'm seeing these days is that there are a lot of women, a lot, who have suboptimal thyroid function because we've got this overload of stress to the system, and the thyroid is such a sensitive gland. So doing a full thyroid panel, which is thyroid stimulating hormone, free T3, free T4, and reverse T3, as well as thyroid antibodies.
I'm glad you said that. I just got to jump in on that because I was losing my hair for 2 years, and the provider I was going to was just doing the basic test and was like, "Your thyroid is fine. This is fine. That is fine." And I'm like, "Look, my hair is just coming out. I'm doing everything I can." And I finally went to a specialist and another provider, and they did a thyroid panel, not just the big thyroid thing. And I mean, I barely had any function. And that was a problem. They got me on Synthroid. And within 6 months or so, my hair was coming back and I felt better. But they tested a couple of times to tell me, no, your thyroid is fine. Because my mother has had to have her thyroid removed, so I suspected
Mm,
that, but they kept saying, "No, it's not. No, it's not." And I'm just big on being an advocate. If things aren't getting better, don't just accept this is my life. You don't have to be miserable. For women, our hair, I was just distraught about that. So
mm, mm,
you're
mm.
making really great points, and I've experienced a lot of what you're saying, but I'm also learning a lot too. So I'm sorry I cut you off, but I just had to tell my thyroid story.
Thank you. No, thank you. I think, but that's really relevant because it's really just I guess a lesson to everybody in just advocating for your health. If you think that there is something going on, keep going to somebody until they will truly listen to you.
Yes,
I think, unfortunately, that the traditional medical model, I know things are quite bad in the US, is there's no time for these doctors to really listen. I think everybody's overworked,
right.
stressed, all those things. But it's you are in your body, you know if things are wrong. But I do, just for your listeners as well, and I can share the link with you, I do have a resource that outlines these key tests and also what the optimal ranges are. I think it's so important to be able to assess your test results to
Yes,
an optimal range standpoint, because the normal ranges are so broad. It's being statistically
true.
normal in a sick society is not going to help you feel the best. So
Right.
that's a resource, that I have to share with your audience as well. And for any of
Wonderful.
you who
Thank you.
do have pleasure, and for any of you who do have thyroid like symptoms, or like things like weight loss resistance, you're cold all the time, your hair's thinning or falling out, constipated, you've got really heavy bleeding, any kind of symptoms like that all point to the thyroid. So I also have a thyroid symptom assessment quiz that I can share with you as well, because I think it's helpful to see, well, connecting the dots between these symptoms that are non-specific, but when pulled together can show you that
Right.
there's something potentially going on. And you know the difference of when you start to address your thyroid function, how different you feel.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, it was a game changer, big
Mm.
time, just emotionally, physically, in every way.
Yeah.
It was a big impact. So, um, well, if it wasn't obvious to people, it should be now that you are a very well informed health coach, and I'm sure that your clients really benefit from what you share. And I appreciate you giving information so freely here today. Would you, before we go, tell us a little bit more about an integrative health practitioner and health coach? What do you do, and how do you work with clients, and how can they find you online
Mm.
if they're interested in working with you?
Mm. Absolutely. So I work with clients in groups and one-on-one. And really what I'm so passionate about is helping women to optimize each of the different pillars of health. So it's nutrition, exercise, stress management, toxin removal, um, rest, like connecting to their ability to calm and to get into the parasympathetic nervous system,
Mhm,
um, emotional health, mindset. It's all of these different pillars, gut health. So I really help women generally it's women who come to me, but I do love to work with men who are interested in health optimization.
mhm,
People will come to me with their particular goals. And so I'll take a zoom out, understand their whole lifestyle, their health history, like where things maybe started to go wrong, like really even back to birth. Like what
mhm.
happened? Were you,
Wow.
you know, were you born through cesarean, breastfed, all of those sorts of things, because it can
Okay.
all contribute to how somebody, like if they have specific symptoms now, if they have autoimmune conditions or thyroid conditions now. And then I work with them based on the area where is the most need. Like this is for my one-on-one clients, where there is the most need. We start off on an area. So it could be that we're actually just starting off with mindset work. And
Mhm.
then we move into nutrition. And then, we move into supporting them with sleep. Depending on their starting point and where I feel the most impact will be gained, that's the pillar that I work with them on. And then we go on a journey together. So my coaching programs are very close and continuous. So I meet with my clients every week, and then it goes on to every second week. But I'm in contact with them all the time, because what I believe is that it's between the sessions that I can really help them navigate and keep consistent with the new habits that they're trying to create, because it's all habit change.
Right.
Unless there's a particular protocol that we're working on, which I then just prescribe if they've got gut issues. We'll run, if people have the finances, we'll run additional testing. And then I also work with women in groups. At the moment, I'm creating and running a pilot for a thyroid health program for women with hypothyroidism.
Nice.
And most of them have Hashimoto's. So we're working through lifestyle practices and supporting their thyroid function. And I'm also launching a 4-week course in February called the Midlife Women's Nutritional Toolkit. So this is unpacking this topic even more and really helping women understand what nutritional changes are necessary for them to feel the best, change their body, break through weight loss resistance, break emotional eating patterns, live with energy, all those good things.
Live your best life. You've got a lot of great opportunities there for people to work with you one-on-one or in your groups. Can you tell us how to connect with you online, your website, and how to get more information? And I'll drop this in the show notes along with some of the other resources that you've mentioned.
Perfect. Yeah, so my business name is Your Tiny Voice. It's all around supporting people to connect to their intuition so that they can move forward, tapping into their intuition to live their best life, because it's from a place of balance that you can actually hear your intuition and be guided properly by it. And so my website is ytvhealthcoaching.com. Instagram is your_tiny_voice, and Facebook is YTV Health Coaching.
Great. And again, those will be in our show notes. Well, thank you so much, Sheryl, for joining us today. This has been a delightful and very informative interview.
Thanks for having me.
And thank you, listeners, for your time. Please remember to like, subscribe, and share. Also, I invite you to visit my website at drmoanderson.com to learn more about my services as a speaker and speaker coach, as well as my books and motivational videos. Until next week, be well and be safe.